Level Up is a regular podcast that brings you topics to help you perform at work and in life at your very highest level. Your host is Dan Chiodo, an executive coach, corporate trainer, and author. He is president of Impact Training and Executive Coaching. And now, here's Dan.
Very much appreciated, Jesse. Thank you for introducing this episode of Level Up, the place to go when you want to grow. So right now it's the beginning of a year, so we're looking for those things that can help us be peak performers. And my guest that I have today is going to be great at that. Tell you a little bit about him. He did not start in the field that he's in now. He's in the marketing field now, but started in microbiology and also politics. So it's very interesting. You know, people who do the scientific things, they're really good at the arts things too. So how beautiful that he now runs a marketing firm. He and his wife Candace have Storm Marketing. And today we're going to take a look at how he does what he does, because right now he's not only in the local field in Joplin, Missouri, where he's at, but national and global, and really finding his spot there. The agency's doing very well. So my guest today is Dustin Storm, owner of Storm Cloud Marketing. Thank you, Dustin, for taking time to be with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Dan.
This just in. Today's topic is beyond goal setting, creating a strategy to get shit done. I think we have their interest now. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I hope so. It's a really interesting attention grabber, not just because of obviously the hook to bring you in, but because, you know, it's January right now when we're sitting here filming this, and it's New Year's resolution time. Like, well, you know, we're 3 weeks into the month, and like, how many people are actually doing their New Year's resolutions or sticking to it? So this topic of goals and actually going beyond setting the goal, which is really easy to do, to creating a plan to achieve it, I think is something that's incredibly difficult to do.
You're right. You're right. Think about all those people who set these wonderful goals, and yet then life happens and they never get to them. So what have you found that works well?
Well, you know, I think we're humans, and on the personal side of things, it seems like it's always harder to stick to or to achieve personal goals. Business goals, for whatever reason, seem to be much easier the more organized that you get. So what if we take this approach of business goal setting and actionable plans that spring from those and apply it to the personal side of things too, or not just the personal side, but anything. So looking at, you know, setting a goal, sure. Okay. You know what you want to do. Deciding how you get there is a completely different deal. So let's look at the process that you actually go through to make that happen. And that I feel like is a pretty simple process of just being patient and taking time to go through it step by step and do the what if thinking. If it's a time driven goal, like we have to achieve this by X date, then it makes sense to start at the end and to say, this is where I need to be by here. So what are the checkpoints along the way that I need to get to? And at that phase, taking a very high level approach and saying, okay, I don't need to think about every single little step that I need to do right now. What are the big things that need to happen? What are those big checkpoints? What are the milestones that happen in between A and B? Like what are those things that are the big things that have to be knocked out to get us there? So identifying those essentially creates an outline for your goal setting. And you know, here are the segments or phases that I need to go through. And then it's just a matter of taking time for each one of those phases and then saying, okay, so within this phase, are there sub phases, or am I ready to look at individual tasks now? And drilling it down to the individual task is just thinking in depth about the specific actions that have to be taken to achieve each step or phase or sub goal. And think about who's doing it and when it should be done and what they need to do it well and what happens when it's done. And that leads you to the next step. So it's purely a matter of taking the time to think about, okay, this seems huge, right? It always seems huge. the goal of growing your business by X%, or the goal of breaking into this new field by X time. It always seems like a big, huge, hairy thing. But when you start identifying the little steps and creating a roadmap, then you have a bunch of really small, really easy tasks. And then just following through with that and making sure that you're going through it, I think is the easy way to go. Now, if you think about what if I applied that same kind of approach to exercising more, or starting a new hobby, or, applying more time to family, or whatever it is that your personal goal is. I think if you take that kind of high level approach and say, where am I now and where do I want to be, and what are the things that need to change? And then within those things that need to change, what are the very specific things that need to be done to create that change?
Yes, I think that's why a lot of people develop vision boards, so that they can have pictures of where I want to be, what I want to look like. And that way you start thinking it is possible. I like your idea too of breaking it down into smaller goals. And also what you're saying about thinking about all of this. Some people don't do that. They don't do goal setting. But to hear you talk about it, you really spend time on it. And if you think about it, every good book, that author didn't just write it, but went over it and over it to bring out the most important things. And that made the book. That made maybe the bestseller. So I like the way you're saying you look for those big things. Of course, you can't accomplish all of them all at once.
Right. Well, and I think, personally, when I think about a vision board or placing that end goal in front of me that stares at me all the time, that can be really daunting to a lot of people. It's really easy to get overwhelmed by the fact that you're not where you want to be yet. And for those people that get overwhelmed easily by the fact that you're not there yet, having that tiny little step of all I need to worry about is getting this one little thing done right now. That's it. And then I can move on to the next thing. It's quite a bit easier to stick to that plan because you don't feel like a failure every day. And I think for people that are driven by, the fear of failure or have that ingredient in the mix, it's a possible tool for them to avoid the crippling effect that can have. And you mentioned something here along the lines of when you're creating that outline, how you can think about it. And I've had this thought before, and we didn't plan on talking about it today, but it ties in pretty well. I think even if it's not an outline for a book or an outline for a plan that you think about for this, you think about like a story arc. You think about like a movie plot. What would your movie look like if you had control of it? If you could write your own movie and you could play the leading role in this action drama thriller that got you, that was the story of you achieving this goal, what would you write and what would happen and who's there? And then, write the script, write your script and then live it. I think you deciding to take the actions of this is where I'm headed today, and this is where I'm headed overall, I think is hugely powerful. Where most people stop is this is where I want to go. And that's it. So having that plan afterward is hugely important and overlooked.
I like the movie script effect because a lot of times in coaching, when I coach people, we'll talk about, think about your eulogy. What will it read like? And so now you have to picture yourself dead. But a movie script, that's exciting because there could be so much there. Have you ever been to a movie before and you see a character and you kind of put yourself in his shoes for a while and say, wow, if that were me?
Yeah, and I think it helps with some ad-libbing too, because you can't ever account for all of the stuff that's going to happen that you didn't plan for. And if it does, I whenever I was going through a lot of, or go through now, a lot of big moves that can be really stressful, thinking about living the movie living the movie that I want to live is really powerful. And I think when those crazy things that you didn't plan for happen, it's just a question of what would my character do? So if I had written this movie for myself and I was living this movie, what would my character, when faced with this situation, do? And then it kind of creates a bar or a benchmark for you to not do the easy thing, but to do what should be done in the context of your goals, in the context of your movie. What action would you take then? And filtering everything that you do through that, which I'm a guy who has to constantly harp on myself not to be lazy. And I've done it enough to where it's just hardwired now not to be, and to make those choices that aren't lazy, but still have to remind myself with every single thing that I do not to be lazy. Living that character role and filtering everything that you do through that. And what I mean by filtering everything that you do through that is actually, talking to yourself while you're making decisions and asking yourself, is this decision within the context of where I want to go? Does this decision help or harm me? What is the version of me that I want to be? What decision would he make? And filtering it so that you make sure that you stay in character throughout that journey that you want to be on. And that's really good for the in-between stuff that you don't plan for, but planning for it, I think, really helps maintain that throughout. We're getting weird, aren't we? Is this a weird conversation?
This is very good. No. If it's weird, it's still good, because
that's what she said.
Because as you're talking about that, this character that we would be in the film. So let's say the film is written and we know what's going to happen. In real life, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So we have a plan and we're trying to follow that plan, but we will go down some other trails that we don't know about yet. But doesn't that make us stronger? Doesn't that make us better? At the end of the year, shouldn't we say, I did stay on plan, but I also reacted to the things I needed to react to, and that makes me a more enhanced person, don't you think?
Agreed. And I remember you talking to us a lot about this exact thing whenever we first purchased the business, the agency, and we're launching it, and we had this vision for what we wanted to happen and what we wanted to do, and we'd come back 6 or 9 months later, and you would review what we had said were our goals at the time, and we'd be like, wow, so much has happened since then. And being able to have the flexibility to act on opportunity that can help you go even further, or maybe it is a little bit of a different direction, but it's giving yourself the flexibility to be able to edit as you go is huge. And I think being aware of it is the requirement for that. Being aware that you are altering your trajectory and knowing what you're giving up and what you're gaining is huge. But nothing ever goes exactly as planned. So give yourself the ability to riff on it as you go, and just make sure that maybe that's a point where staying in character is even more important. You've got this movie of this guy who achieves this goal. Mm-hmm. What would he do in that occasion? Would he choose to alter his course from what he originally wanted? Is this better?
And I think we walk a fine line every day. We're trying to follow that plan, but just as you said, you really have to think about this. Should I go in this other direction? Should I take this other project on? Should I learn about this to know more about it because I need it right now? So that can be very helpful.
Yeah, what are you giving up? That's the question, I guess.
I think I've got a lot of other questions, but let's take a break. And this is Dan Chiodo, host for Level Up, and with me today is Dustin Storm with a wonderful drink. This could be the commercial break right there. So let's all fuel up with whatever beverage we need, and we'll be right back after this. If you just tuned in, you're listening to Level Up. This is your host, Dan Chiodo, and today I'm talking to Dustin Storm, and we're talking about goals. And so, of course, the title again, Beyond Goal Setting, Creating a Strategy to Get Shit Done. So that's what we try to do each and every day. Dustin, you mentioned something earlier on the flip side of this episode, and you talked about what if thinking. Do you want to explain that a little bit so everybody knows what is what if thinking?
Yeah. So I think going through the what if thinking, and this is something that I really honed in on and figured out that I was decently good at during the legislative days, working on specific legislation and prepping it for debate forces you to go through those things of stepping into your opponent's mind and thinking about everything that they're going to attack, or what are all the scenarios that this needs to be put through. So going through the what if thinking as it relates to your plan is simply the same thing of saying, here's this specific step that needs to be done, or here's this phase. What if this obstacle is in my way? What if the time that I have to allow to this is not what I thought it was? What if your resources don't allow for X, Y, or Z? But thinking about every possible thing that could get in your way and going ahead and pre-answering those questions is immensely helpful. Now again, there's no way that we can plan for everything, but there are some things that we can plan for. So this is for the foreseeable things that could go wrong. And those we all know because they're the ones that pop up and we're like, man, what if this happens? If you're thinking it, give it some attention. And then the next time it pops up, you're like, oh, it's okay. I have a plan for that. I know what I'm going to do if and when that happens. And that obviously makes your planning quite a bit more intense, but that's also the kind of thing that you can just be doing in the background because you're going to have that what if question while you're driving or in the shower. So just remembering your answer to that or writing down that question and giving it 15 minutes to think about at least an initial plan gives you essentially that playbook of preparedness as you face things later on.
That is good. I'd love to look at what people have done in different careers to see how it might apply to what they're doing now. So that one's really essential, isn't it? Getting into your opponent's mind is something that could come very well for people who have clients or prospects. It's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. And you mentioned something a minute ago that made me think of the success leaves footprints or success leaves breadcrumbs kind of approach. And that is, chances are that someone has faced the kind of thing that you're facing right now. Chances are that someone has faced the same kind of opposition that you're facing right now, and discovering the ones who handled it well and not well, what they did can be hugely beneficial too. And the same thing for your competitive mindset, looking at their mindset and trying to put yourself in their shoes, I think can be really helpful too. So really just thinking about this and looking at motivating factors on everything that could possibly affect you internally and externally is going to be really helpful. And it's not something that you have to is like a prerequisite for every step that you have. I think it's a general, be thinking about this in the back of your head, but not in the I'm just going to worry about it kind of context. Think about it in the I'm identifying possible obstacles so that I can inventory and attack them.
Mm-hmm. Think about it. A surgeon would do that, I'm sure. They think they know what's going to happen, but once they get inside the body, they may find they have to take a completely different approach. And they're ready for that because they've studied it and they know that it could happen. So I think that can be very good. As we talk about goal setting, do you think it's important to tell other people what your goals are?
I do. I think there's some accountability there for sure. And I'm fortunate enough to have a really talented and awesome team that's sitting here listening to us do this podcast. And the majority of my goals involve them. so the people that you're going to involve, or the characters in your movie, I think you absolutely have to let know what their role is. Not everyone, obviously, but the key, those key actors and actresses in your plot. I think it's really important to bring them on board and let them know. And for a lot of people, it's an opportunity for them to align goals. So if everybody knows where they're going and everybody wants to go that way, everybody's going to keep each other in check and make sure you're headed that direction. Life is still going to happen and things are going to get busy, but when you all know what movie you're in, everyone can kind of start ad-libbing the same direction too. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
It is really helpful.
Yes, and we talk about teamwork, so we need good teamwork. But more than that, we need good teammates. And so think about the movie. And if we had one actor that was poor, the movie, we would focus on that as viewers of that movie, probably. But if we have the best actors, then that's what happens. So we really have to bring our best selves, if it's the work setting, to work each day so that we can be a part of this team. Sometimes I'll watch when a show has a last episode. And one of those that I saw was Big Bang Theory. And so their last episode was live. And when they interviewed those people and talked to them, they kept saying, you don't realize what good friends we were, good teammates we were, and how this is so hard that we're not going to be doing this show anymore. It was just a blast. And they talked about the fact that the roles they had weren't really that difficult. They're accomplished actors, but because there was a flow, they all contributed together. So I think that really helps.
Yeah. So two notes on that. Number one, I'm so glad that you brought up, people that are involved, because that's quite possibly going to be your biggest challenge with any goal plan, is actually, the people that are involved. No one tells you whenever you start off on the journey of executive development or running your own business. No one ever tells you that people are going to be the hardest thing about all of it. But it is. And yeah, you're right. I mean, even just one person can rock the boat in a disastrous way. So finding the right people to all run in the same direction and share a mindset and have a positive environment is hugely important. And then on the second half of what you said, the flow that you have over time and that you develop over time makes things easier. And I think the more kind of tours of duty that you guys do together as a team, the easier it all gets, and the better that cast gets. So it's one of those, your sequel should be better than the original, and your John Wick 3 should be, they should just get progressively better because you're gelling more as a team now. You're doing this every day, so you should be able to identify and grow and write out those movies for yourself and make it just better and better and better if you have a stable team.
I like that. You're right about that. It has to be the right team, a stable team. And it's very interesting. I'm watching a show now that is in its last year. And my wife and I watch the episodes and we'll look at each other and say, this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. How could writers even present this stuff? And what must it be like the actors in the final season just having to do really poor acting? It's just terrible. And yet, I think about another show, Will and Grace, where I believe the new show with the same actors is even better than the first one. So I think that's what we need to strive to do. How can we be the very best? How can we be genius in our fields?
Yep.
And
that's it's important for every single member to challenge themselves every day. But like you said, even good actors can have bad writing. So you have to make sure that you're utilizing your team members well. And that's immensely difficult too. And you're right, to be a good actor stuck with bad writing is a poor leadership thing. So that's a waste, obviously. And you hate to see something like that happen. So it's overwhelming. I mean, to think about how much is there. So again, breaking it up and going through those individual steps, to give yourself just a task. Just your goal is to have, that one thing to do today, or that chronological list of things to do today, so that you are always headed in the right direction. Something that we didn't talk about, and it doesn't apply so much in our cases, but a lot of people have these goals and they're completely flying solo. That's really difficult, and I've been there before. Whenever we started off the journey to acquire this agency, it was a solo flight kind of process in the beginning, until I connected with people who helped connect me with other people. And then it grew from there. Until that point, I'm fairly certain it had been about a 3-year process of me wanting to do something about it myself, but not having the connections or the resources to be able to make it happen. And I think that's a chronological thing too: connections and resources. Being able to connect with people who you can talk to these goals about, and they can help give you ideas on connecting you with other people who can help you get those directions or that general direction, or get even just phases started. But being able to connect you with people who can help get you there was the tipping point for me. And there's a small group of people that I can look back on and say, these were pivotal people in my life, because they took the time to listen to the story that I had written for myself, and say, I think I can help you make that happen. Let me introduce you to X, Y, or Z.
I like that. And when I mentioned sharing the goal with someone, I think that's so helpful, because then you can see what their reaction is too. Maybe you are stretching too far, or maybe you haven't stretched enough, and that discussion can maybe help a little bit, even if it's someone within your field, so that you can talk to them and maybe learn about some goals they have, and you think, boy, my goals aren't quite what perhaps they could be. So, well, and you also spend some time talking about the personal goals, and I think that's important too. Why not approach those just like you do the business goals? Because that really makes you happy when you can make a change in your life, don't you think?
Yeah, well, and as a small business owner, but I think this is true for everybody, the lines are increasingly blurred between work life and personal life. And maybe that's because we have a really good small team, and everything just kind of flows back and forth. This is life. It doesn't feel all that different for me. The line is blurred between work life and home life. Like it's all one and the same. So it makes perfect sense to use the same approaches for everything that we're trying to accomplish. But I think that might be something that a lot of people haven't thought about is the personal goal side of things. It's really easy to throw a goal out, but not actually develop a plan. But you're doing the same thing in the business setting. You're just actually creating the plan. Why not carry the things that work through to the personal life as well?
Mm-hmm. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Dustin. I think this has been a great discussion about goals. Appreciate that very much. And I think that you've given us some good strategies. And again, so great at this time of year, or whenever you're viewing this, because you should have goals. You should be a person who wants to achieve things, and most people are. And also the what if, I come back to that, to ask yourself that question, what if, and then brainstorm, think about all the possibilities that are there and see what you can come up with. Also, looking at the challenges you could face. Are you ready for them? Have you thought about them? So we can start out with a very positive picture of how we want this movie to look and how the character is going to be. But we're prepared if that character has to go in another direction too. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank all of our viewers too on Level Up, the place to go when you want to grow. And why don't you come up with some goals for the year if you haven't already? Don't just do the personal ones, but do the business ones, both of them. Cheers.